Hello and welcome to Shooting the Breeze, episode 13, the formal gun podcast of WaltonPA.com. And welcome to the episode that almost never was, sort of. I guess it eventually would have been done, but it was almost very late. And, you're probably not terribly interested in hearing the long, boring story, but since this is my podcast and I can do what I want to, I'm going to tell it to you anyway. Over the weekend, Saturday, you may have heard about this freak snowstorm that hit some of the East Coast. Well, I'm in Pennsylvania, about, 60 miles northwest of Philadelphia, and snow is not really uncommon to us. Initially, we were predicted to get something like 4 inches, is what the forecast was calling for. And, 4 inches is really nothing. After the snow falls, I go out, I shovel my walkway, shovel my sidewalks, dig out 2 cars, and as long as the roads are plowed, we're good to go. It's really no big deal. So, as the day goes on, or Friday-ish, the forecast was upgraded. I don't remember what they bumped it up to. I think it was a maximum of 8 inches of snowfall, and no one is really paying much attention to it. I mean, it's October. We never get snow in October, and if we do, it's snow flurries or a dusting. It's nothing. Well, Saturday rolls around, and I think the forecast was saying by 6 a.m. we were going to see some snowfall, and 6 o'clock came and went, no snowfall. I wasn't surprised. It was no big deal. I wasn't expecting much. Well, 7 o'clock rolls around, and we start to see snowflakes. Well, by 8 o'clock, it was really coming down, and it was starting to lay in patches in the yard. Nothing was sticking to the concrete or the streets, but it was accumulating on vehicles and on our grass. Okay, not a really big deal. Another couple of hours go by, and now it's really starting to stick on the grass. It's getting that crusty, icy kind of layer over top of the sidewalk and streets, and it's sticking in the trees. An hour or two later, and it's really coming down. It's laying everywhere, and now I'm starting to get concerned because I've got a ton of pine trees. I think I've got 15, 16 pine trees, and all of them, you're starting to see the limbs sag kind of low. So I'm kind of worried about them. I've never had a tree come down, but we get tree limbs come down practically every winter from ice and snow. So it's not something that I'm overly concerned about, but if they fall on the wrong thing, it's a problem. If they hit the cable line, or they hit the power line, or they hit the house, something like that. So I was kind of keeping an eye on them, and then my wife and I put our daughter down, and we were walking out of her bedroom, and we went into ours, and we hear this bang. So I throw a coat on, I run outside, I run around the house. I'm freaking out. I thought maybe a tree hit the house. It was loud. And I find this massive tree limb laying on the ground. It must have fell out of the pine tree, clipped the corner of my house. Didn't do any damage or anything. Just made a lot of noise, hits the ground, and my neighbors are just coming out of their house. I guess they wanted to investigate the noise as well. So we get to talking, and my neighbor says, yeah, I'm kind of worried about that tree back there. And peek my head around, around back corner. Oh, yeah, wow, that tree up there, you mean? Yeah, it's leaning a lot heavier than usual. And I'm kind of tracking it. Well, if that tree goes, it looks like it might clip my daughter's bedroom window. That's a problem. So now I'm kind of worried. I don't really want my daughter in her bedroom. So I tell my wife, get her out of there, because if this tree goes, it's going to be a problem. So my wife gets her out of her room, and we just kind of keep an eye on the tree. And as we're keeping an eye on the tree, we're just watching other things on the property, watching the tree limbs sag more and more. And at one point, I just went out on the porch and just kind of looking around. The snow was coming down really heavy, and it just kind of sounded like shotgun blasts going off in the distance. Tree limbs back in the woods are popping. Tree limbs in the neighbor's yard are popping. I've got pine limbs that are popping. And I look out back, and I've got this big walnut tree that's leaning a little heavier than usual. Now I'm kind of worried about that. I go inside, I lay down on the couch where my wife and I are watching TV. My ass no sooner hits the couch cushion, and we hear this loud boom. So I jump up, I run out of the house again, and hear this big walnut tree out back went. And we're on a hill, so my house is cut into the hill, and the pine tree is like, or the walnut tree is back here, and it fell. Fortunately, it dug into the ground and didn't slide into my house. But it was kind of scary. I went around in the yard and got around and took some photos, and just kind of got a closer look. I guess the weight of all the snow, this really heavy, wet snow, on top of this tree with green leaves that snow was sticking to, was just too much, and it ripped the root ball right out of the ground. Came down. Fortunately, it had a bunch of heavy limbs that really dug in, and once the tree hit the ground, it didn't go anywhere. It didn't slide at all. So that was, the most nerve-wracking part of this big storm. Wasn't much longer after that my power went out. When my power went out, my heat went out, and it was, I guess it was about 24 hours before it was back on. Throughout that time, we had one more tree come down, small, maybe that big around the trunk, not a big deal. The other walnut was, that was 2 feet across at least. So that was a pretty big tree. When it all settled, late that night, it stopped snowing. Sunday morning rolls around. Beautiful sky. It was really nice out. It was a mite bit cold in the house, but I go outside. I'm sitting on the porch, and I decide, I'm gonna go find breakfast. Since we have an electric range, we had no way to cook and no way to make coffee. I was tempted to boil water on my grill. I have a charcoal grill, and then use a French press to try to make coffee. But all I have are these K-cups, so I don't know how well that would have worked in a French press. But I go out to get breakfast. All kinds of damage in the area. Several stores don't have power. I wound up stopping at a Sheetz, which is a gas station convenience chain. And, I went in, they have made to order food. I ordered breakfast, went back home, talked to my wife. And shortly after that, my wife went down to her parents' house, took our daughter down there. It was getting a little too cold in the house. And I had to go out and buy a chainsaw, and I spent all day from the time I bought the chainsaw that morning until the sun went down cutting up wood. And I spent all day today. I called off of work because I have a mess to deal with. And I spent all day cleaning up wood some more, and I still have a ton left to do. So that's why this podcast almost didn't make it. It's Monday. I'm really sore. I'm tired. And I've spent the last 2 days making an absolute mess in the yard. There's sawdust everywhere. It's a mud pit, and I'm just tired. And to cap it all off, today is Halloween, so I didn't realize that we were doing the trick-or-treating thing as early as we did. So I was kind of planning my cleanup in hopes that I could finish around 2:30, 3 o'clock. Well, I didn't get done, or actually I was planning on working until 1:30, 2 o'clock, getting cleaned up and then doing the podcast, but I lost track of time, and I think it was around 3 o'clock that I got finished. And by the time I got cleaned up and was planning on heading down here to do the podcast, my wife says, we're going to be leaving, 45 minutes to an hour. I was like, that's not enough time. So, we did the whole Halloween thing, and finally, it's getting late. It's actually much later than I would like to do this podcast, but since theoretically I work from home tomorrow, I may be able to sleep in a little bit later than usual, and, that's how we're going to make this thing work. Hopefully, we'll get this thing posted early-ish tomorrow, and we'll make this podcast happen. And since you've just listened to me ramble for 10 minutes, I guess it's about time to light my cigar, sip on my coffee a little bit because my throat is kind of dry from all that talking, and then we'll get rolling with this podcast. So sit tight, and I will be right back. All right, well, it is time for the news. So let's get this podcast rolling and get on with it. So, this news piece comes from the Daily Caller, and it is entitled, Gun Control Widely Disfavored in Recent Poll. This is from Bob Barr, former Congressman, Republican, Georgia. And I'm not seeing a published date. Oh, yeah, there it is. Today, actually, October 31st. And it goes on to say, excuse me, If anyone in the if anyone in the Obama campaign is considering using gun control as an issue in next year's campaign, the Republican Party should encourage them with a sizable donation. The latest national issue poll from the Gallup organization confirms that Barack Obama's two unsuccessful predecessors found out the hard way. A strong majority of American voters do not favor gun control and will prove it with their votes. The Gallup survey reflects not a sudden spike in support for firearms rights, but rather the culmination of a generational effort by the National Rifle Association and other organizations to reacquaint Americans with the Constitution. For example, a half-century ago, according to a 1959 survey, more than half of all citizens, 60%, supported an outright ban on handguns. That sentiment led Congress to passing the first national gun control law of the modern era in 1968. That act, however, served as a wake-up call to millions of Americans who understood that the right to keep and bear arms, enshrined in the Bill of Rights as the Second Amendment, protected a fundamental right, but one that clearly was susceptible to being undermined by politicians. Now, according to the Gallup poll, a record low percentage of Americans, just 26%, support a handgun ban, while nearly three-quarters, 73%, oppose such a measure. The survey also found that more than half of the population, 53%, opposes more restrictive laws against semi-automatic rifles and so-called assault weapons. Ownership of firearms is rising as well, among those who identified themselves as Democrats as well as Republicans, or among those. According to the survey, nearly half of all Americans, 47%, say that they have a gun in their home. This represents a 6-point jump from just 1 year ago, and it is the highest since the mid-1990s. The partisan divide on the issue is steadily shrinking as 55% of Republicans and 40% of Democrats, up 8 points from 2010, acknowledge having a firearm in their home. Numbers such as reflected in this nonpartisan Gallup poll, or Gallup survey, essentially guarantee that any attempt this cycle to move the electorate based on a gun control agenda would be suicidal, particularly considering the flack for the Obama administration continues to receive over the botched ATF operation commonly known as Fast and Furious. Such broad opposition to gun control, however, has not prevented political leaders at the local level from trying to deny citizens within their jurisdiction the full benefit of the Second Amendment's guarantee, and it is now not only New York's Mayor Michael Bloomberg who is involved in such efforts. Anti-gun political leaders in the District of Columbia and Chicago, for example, continue to undermine the two most recent Second Amendment decisions by the United States Supreme Court, decisions that denied those very governments the authority to stop citizens from possessing firearms for self-defense. Those landmark cases, District of Columbia versus Heller in 2008 and McDonald versus Chicago in 2010, established that gun bans in both jurisdictions were unconstitutional. Thus, while gun control at the national level may be a moribund campaign issue, at least for the time being, anti-gun politicians like Mayor Bloomberg and other Second Amendment opponents such as leftist filmmaker Michael Moore will continue their tirades through the media and in local political venues. Those of us who believe in, support, and understand that the Second Amendment guarantees a fundamental human right to possess the means to defend oneself also cannot forget that public support waxes and wanes and that we cannot rest on the laurels of today's polls. So, just kind of an interesting heads up on this, based on this recent Gallup poll that came out. And when it came out, it seemed to hit my Google Reader like wildfire. It seemed to pop up everywhere that those in support for gun restrictions was at an all-time low of 26%. And this just happened to be the most recent one that I found, so I thought I would pull it out and read it to you because it's kind of interesting. I don't know that I put a lot of stock in some of these polls, just because of, polls in general. I'm not terribly impressed by the numbers because it's always just a piece of the population that they're drawing information from, and then kind of extrapolating it from there. So if we survey, for instance, 25% of the population, then we can do this, and theoretically, we can use that 25% and create a baseline, and it just kind of gets confusing, and it's not a true representation, but it's interesting nonetheless. So there's your first piece of news. All right, for our second news item, I guess I should probably credit the NRA for bringing this one to my attention. It came across the NRA Twitter feed about a 66-year-old woman who shoots and kills a home intruder. Now, I was originally going to feature the NRA news article because it was kind of an analysis of the information in the original news article, but it really didn't make sense without first understanding what was going on in the original news article. So I'm not going to do both. I'm just going to give you one, and maybe I'll link to the other as well. But this comes from The Blaze. It is entitled, "Very Afraid, 66-year-old woman shoots and kills home intruder." Now, there's also some video associated with this, which looks like it comes from CBS. I don't know if I can embed it. If I can, it'll be in the show notes, and you'll be able to check it out there. If not, obviously, the link will be in the show notes. You could go directly to the news article and click play. But, so here it goes. This was posted on October 27th, and it goes on to say, an elderly Northern California woman woke early Friday morning to hear an intruder attempting to break into her home. CBS 12 reports that the 66-year-old Donna Hopper is still shaken after shooting the 37-year-old intruder dead. Hopper says she was terrified when she heard the intruder at her door, firing 2 warning shots through her window to scare the man away. When 37-year-old Jesse Edward Thice persisted, attempting to come back in, Hopper fired a fatal shot in his abdomen, killing Thice on the scene. Hopper told CBS 12 that she never wanted to hurt anyone and that she was just acting on instinct. The Record Searchlight of Redding, California, where the crime took place, writes that prosecutors say Hopper's actions were justified. He meant her lethal harm, Shasta County Chief Deputy District Attorney Josh Lowry said. An official determination won't be made until the DA's office has a chance to review the police and autopsy reports, Lowry said. An autopsy will likely be performed Monday. Local officials say that the shooting is yet another example of how inmates at the continually full Shasta County Jail are being released early and going out and committing more crime, sometimes within hours of their release. The Searchlight reports that Thice had been released from the jail the morning before the shooting took place. Hopper's chilling description of the events on CBS News with the 911 dispatcher who was on the line with her during the ordeal. At that point, they kind of lead you into the video, which is the elderly woman, the 911 dispatcher, and a news reporter, and they're kind of talking back and forth. And it was really interesting because the woman set herself up really, really well. I was really impressed with everything up to a certain point. So basically, it's around 4:30 in the morning or something like that, and she hears banging on her door. So she gets out of bed, and she picks up the phone and heads to the door. Now, when she gets to the door, she positions herself in a door frame so that I'm not quite sure why she did that. She said she was afraid of what was on the other side. However, she put herself in a good tactical position because being sort of in the door frame means multiple studs and lots more things to stop a projectile if one were to be fired. But at any rate, she goes on to say that she has a motion light outside of her door. So, that's good in the sense that it goes on immediately. Sometimes it can sort of surprise anyone that's walking up on your porch. I know sometimes I get freaked out when I go up to a house for whatever reason the light pops on. It happens at my in-laws quite a bit. Sometimes it's on, sometimes it's not, and sometimes you walk right past the light and it never goes on, and other times it's on, and it scares the hell out of you when it goes on and floods you with light. But she's got this light set up, and she has a security screen door, and a lot of people have these. I don't, and I wish I did. But they're kind of like a heavy duty screen door that is lockable, and while they're not foolproof, they're fairly sturdy for what they are. So he's banging on the door. She calls out, who are you? What do you want? He says something along the lines of, I'm coming in. She says, I don't know you. I'm calling the police. She dials 911. I guess he persists and bangs on the door. She goes into the bedroom and gets the gun. And then she's on the phone with a 911 operator, and somehow the guy winds up pounding on her bedroom window. I guess it's sort of like a ranch-style home. She's down on the ground. The bedroom is in the same living space. But he starts pounding on the window, and I guess he breaks the window. And at this point, she fires 2 warning shots. Personally, I don't feel the warning shots were the best thing to do. However, she fires 2 warning shots hoping that he'll run off. And apparently that's what he does. He kind of goes off, and I guess she sees where he goes. He's going towards a neighbor's house who's also alone and elderly. And at some point he comes back, and it looks like he's climbing through the window. She said he's got his knee up on the window, and he's coming in. She gets really afraid. She's afraid to look him in the face. So she sees a white shirt. She puts sights on the white shirt, presses the trigger, and he gets hit in the torso and dies. And it's really interesting news article just to see how all this goes down. She's obviously really shaken. She gets choked up as she's explaining the whole situation. But it was a really interesting news article. I'm glad she came out okay and unharmed. She may be really emotional about this for quite a long time. But all in all, I think this is a really good story. She protected herself. She didn't get hurt in the process. Bad guy gets his due. So, interesting news article. Definitely check it out. If I can embed this, I will. If not, go to the show notes, click on the Blaze news article, and read it for yourself, and watch the news clip there. All right. Well, I saved the best news article for last. Although I really shouldn't say it's the best. It's probably the worst. At any rate, when I read this news article, I was completely dumbfounded and amazed by what I had read. So, I'm going to read you this news article, and it also comes into play because, remember how in past episodes I was saying that I wanted to do some kind of local stuff? Well, this one just happens to be local, so I can kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone and say this is Pennsylvania local. And even if I wasn't trying to do some local stuff, this one would have made it in anyway. It really doesn't matter whether or not it's local. It's just kind of unbelievable. Okay, so this comes from Philly.com and was published on Monday, October 31st. And it goes on to say, jury, cops didn't jump the gun in car search. William Lawler is convinced that his civil rights were violated during a car stop in which police confiscated his legally owned gun and his permit to carry a concealed weapon. On Friday, a federal jury was convinced otherwise. It was a quick midday run to the post office in April 2008 that landed Lawler, an 11-year Army veteran and social studies teacher, in the back of a police cruiser in handcuffs. The traffic violation for which he was stopped in Northeast Philadelphia was later dismissed, but cops said that he But cops said that the politically charged bumper stickers on the back of his station wagon, including "Fear the government that fears your gun," led them to ask if he had a gun, which he did, and if he had a permit to carry, which he did. "The back of my car is pretty much a billboard for who I am. I'm a political animal," Lawler said in court last week. "This is a legal, peaceful way for me to express my views." But Lawler was ordered out of his car. Cops searched him and the vehicle and took his legally owned permit and his 9mm Glock 17. They drove him to the 8th Police District, but never arrested him or charged him with a crime. One police officer testified last week that Lawler's agitated and upset demeanor led cops to handcuff him. Still, cops said that Lawler never threatened them and followed all instructions. The only statements one officer even remembered Lawler saying had to do with his constitutional rights. Police said that they took his gun and permit because he had not voluntarily informed them that he was carrying a gun. I stood up for myself, yes, Lawler testified. Was I raving madman? No, not by a long shot. Still, it took Lawler 689 days, $2,000 in lawyer fees, and a judge's order just to get his permit and his $800 gun back. Then he took his complaints to federal court, suing the city and 4 police officers he claims were involved in the stop for violating his First and Fourth Amendment rights. He stuck to his guns, turning down a $25,000 offer from the city to settle his claims. He said that he wanted to challenge what he believes is the practice of the police department to harass legal gun owners. I don't want it to happen to me again or anyone else, Lawler said. But after a 3-day trial last week, which included testimony from Police Commissioner Charles Ramsey, a jury deliberated less than 2 hours Friday before shooting down Lawler's claims. Amanda Schoeffel, assistant city solicitor, said that the case was about how, with rights comes responsibilities. She told the jury that Lawler had a distrust for authority and that he had been kicked out of the police academy in 2003. Lawler said that he'd been dismissed from the academy at the commissioner's discretion, but did not elaborate. Lawler's attorney, James Lee, vowed to appeal the case. I'm flabbergasted. I don't know what this jury was thinking, Lee said. This is not over. Lawler won a minor victory, his attorney said afterwards, when Ramsey admitted in court that certain language in an official letter routinely given to concealed weapons permit holders should be softened because it could be misinterpreted. The police department letter says that during a car stop, legal gun holders must inform police immediately if they are armed, a requirement that is not law under the Pennsylvania Uniform Firearms Act. Lawler's First Amendment claim arose from police officers' testimony that a routine car stop had become something more because of the views exposed on his bumper sticker. Mary Catherine Roper, staff attorney with the Philadelphia chapter of the ACLU, said that's troubling. You don't want the police, under any circumstances, making decisions that someone is dangerous because of his beliefs, Roper told the Daily News. If the danger is that he has a strong interest in social and political issues, if that's a sign of danger, we're in a lot of trouble. Lawler's Fourth Amendment claim against unlawful search and seizure arose because, he said, cops had no reason to search his body or his car. Roper said that if Lawler admitted to carrying a licensed firearm, then the police were justified in frisking him and conducting a limited vehicle search to see if he had more guns. During closing arguments, Schoeffel said that Lawler's completely irresponsible behavior during the stop had led to his detention. The plaintiff's best exhibit was his soapbox, Schoeffel said in court. He says, they were looking for a reason to take my gun. They didn't have to look for a reason. The reason was him. It was by the way he was acting. And that's the end of the article. And that was a lot of talking. I need to take a little drink. But this thing is incredible. Like, I can't get my head wrapped around this. So a guy drives to the post office. He's got politically charged bumper stickers on his car. Police see the bumper stickers and decide to pull him over, or I guess stop him somewhere along. I don't know whether it was in the parking lot of the post office or if it was along the way, but for whatever reason they stop him. They ask him if he's got a gun based on his bumper stickers. He says yes. They frisk him, search his car, detain him, drive him to the 8th District Court, don't charge him with anything, take his gun and his license, keep it, and several hundred days later and thousands of dollars later, he finally gets his stuff back and takes it to court. Them offering a $25,000 settlement, I can understand why they did that. They kind of want to get this out of the way, and when they do that, they offer him the settlement. There's no case law or anything like that based on it, because the case was settled outside of court. So this guy decides, you know what, I don't want this to happen to anyone else. I'm going to push through, and I'm going to do away with the money, and I'm gonna keep pushing, and that great on him. That's awesome. It gets to court, and I can't believe that a jury just decided, well, that it's okay that the police did that. It's amazing, and it just goes to show. I don't remember who said it. Masad Ayub, I believe, said it in some form that you're not you're not being judged by a jury of your peers. You're being judged by modern society, or I don't know how it's phrased, but more or less you're being judged by the quote unquote sheeple. And in a city like Philadelphia, which is not very gun friendly, it's really no surprise that the jury came out that way. But just amazing that all this happened to this guy, and he lost in court. Of course, he's going to appeal it, but it's amazing. It makes you really think, what if I were to get involved in something and I were to go to court? And even if I am completely sure that what I did was legal and I was well within my rights, you've got 12 people that may think otherwise. And it's a scary situation. This is a great example of, it doesn't always work out the way it's supposed to, or it should. So, last news article, and I'm not going to babble on anymore, but definitely check out this article. Some of the comments are interesting. It's a Philly.com article, so they're all over the place. Some people just seem like they have no idea, and others put together a really thoughtful response and thought-provoking response, but interesting nonetheless. Alright, this is that part of the show where I look through Google Reader, I pick out some cool stuff, and I put it on here as featured content. So, before I get into the featured content, I guess I should kind of tell you a little bit about the process as of late. I don't know whether it's just because I'm particularly crabby, because I'm a little sore from the backbreaking labor of this weekend's disastrous snowfall, or what, but I'm kind of getting a little agitated by the lack of communication from certain blogs and podcasts. So I've kind of decided to come at this from a little bit of a different angle in certain situations. Now, anything that I find interesting, I definitely want to feature. I'm not going to exclude anyone for any particular reason. But if I think your stuff is cool, I'll pull it aside and I'll make plans for posting it on the podcast. In weeks like this, where I haven't been able to sit down in front of the computer and keep an eye on new content, and in the case of this, where it was like last minute, and I'm scrolling through Google Reader trying to pick up something to put the podcast together, and maybe there's something that catches my eye, there's something I'm on the fence with. If it comes down to there's something I'm kind of on the fence with, I'm going to compare it to blogs that I like, in the sense that their content is good, they produce content on a regular basis, and they're open to communication. For instance, if I'm kind of on the fence about this one particular piece of content, and no matter how many times I've commented on the blog, I never get a comment response. If I've submitted questions and I've never gotten a response, if I've made comments or questions on Facebook and I've been ignored, or comments or questions on Twitter and I've been ignored, I'm going to pass you by for a blog that talks to me on Twitter, talks to me on Facebook, and responds to my emails. So if it's kind of a toss-up and I'm on the fence, and then there's something over here that I'm kind of on the fence about, I'm picking the one that is more open to communication. So with that said, I was really tight for content this week, and again, I was scrolling through and I had some difficulty. So what I did was I picked out two blogs that, for one, I like, and two, I talked to some of these people on Twitter and stuff, so it was like, I'm just going to take their stuff. And the stuff that I'm kind of on the fence about, I'm just going to push it off, and I'm not going to feature it this week. So, kind of, I don't know, you're probably thinking to yourself, oh, well, Walt, that kind of, you've got like this good old boy club kind of going, where you're only going to feature content from these people that talk to you. Well, yes and no. Again, if it's something that I really find interesting and grabs my attention, it's something that, I see it and I've got to read it right then and there, or watch it or listen to it, I'm definitely going to feature it. However, if I'm kind of on the fence, I'm going to default to the people that are open to communication, the people that you could also talk to on Twitter and Facebook and email and whatever, or comments on their blog, and they'll comment back. The people that are more prone to talking to you are the ones that I'm going to feature. It's not just me, just these people that communicate on a regular basis. So with all that said, let's roll into our first piece of featured content, which of course comes from Miguel over at Gun Free Zone, the guy that produces lots of content, puts out insightful content, and who I sort of regularly talk to on Twitter, and I kind of keep an eye out for his posts. So with that said, from Gun Free Zone comes an interesting little chart, which is entitled, "The U.S. owns almost half the civilian weapons in the world." And then there's a breakdown, there's a pie chart, and, not surprising, the according to the Small Arms Survey, out of 650 million weapons in the hands of civilians worldwide, the United States citizens own between 270 and 310 million. And then not only do they show this monstrous part of the pie chart belonging to the United States, he also has a list of data for countries ranked for most violent deaths, and the United States is not on it. So we have the most guns, and we are not in the top 54 countries that have violent death. So it's really interesting to see that there are that many guns, and there is so few. Well, I shouldn't say so few. We fall so much lower in the violent death category than a lot of these other countries. So definitely head over and check it out. Some of the countries that own the most guns were kind of interesting. I would have never expected India, China, and Germany to have as many weapons as they do in civilian hands, but it's interesting. And then, they break down, and then there's another figure, countries ranked by violent death rate per 100,000 population. And the data goes from 2004 to 2009. So interesting stuff. Definitely worth heading over to Gun Free Zone and checking it out. Next up for the second piece of featured content is a post entitled "Put Your Best Foot Forward" from the AKs and Cupcakes blog. This comes from Christine, and much like Miguel over at Gun Free Zone, she has an open channel of communication where you can talk to her on Twitter and she'll actually talk back and stuff like that. So it's it's refreshing to see a blogger who actually talks back and forth instead of just kind of does nothing regardless of the tweets and stuff like that. But I'm getting kind of bitter and off topic. But I first heard of Christine on the Empty Mags podcast. Again, another blogger podcaster that has open channels of communication. But Jason did an interview with her about the Skirmish Association. I thought it was really cool. And immediately after listening to that podcast, I went over to her blog, AKs and Cupcakes again, and I subscribed to it. And I keep an eye on it. It pops up in my Google Reader and stuff like that. But this is actually a video from YouTube that I've seen before. There's no post along with it. It's just a video embedded into the blog post. But it's a guy that looks like he went to the range. He pulled his car up where a shooting bench would be, and he's got no arms. So he's sort of laying on the hood of his car, back up against the windshield, and he's got some sandbags that he's propping his feet up on, and he's firing his gun with his feet. And then after he's done firing the gun, he begins to load magazines again with his feet. It's really cool to see someone who's obviously has a disability doing what he loves to do anyway, and finding a way to continue doing what he loves to do. And it's kind of like an inspiring video and really interesting. It's like I don't remember the guy's name, but a while back you started seeing a lot of these videos come across YouTube and various places on the web where there was a guy who had no arms who was doing Tom Petty covers. I think I watched like 6 or 7 different videos of him playing the guitar with his feet and singing along to Tom Petty music. And, it was really cool stuff, and this is along the same lines. There you had a guy that loves to play guitar, loves music, so he adapts and overcomes, and he plays guitar with his feet. Here you've got a guy that loves guns. Or I would assume he loves guns if he went through all the relearning to fire a gun with your feet. But it's really cool and inspirational and stuff like that. So head over to AKs and Cupcakes and check it out. All right, for the last piece of feature content, I have something from the Shooting Illustrated blog. Whether or not they have open lines of communication, I really don't know. I would assume they have a writing team, and I really don't pay much attention to the blog aspect of it. I mean, I subscribe to the RSS feed, so I get all of the information, but a lot of times I don't click through to the actual blog and get the information there. I just get it in Google Reader and kind of go from there. But when I was scanning through Google Reader, there was this interesting headline that caught my eye, and it was Texas CCW ads raising controversy. Okay, well, what's this all about? Well, there's a video embedded in the RSS feed, and I didn't see they actually tell you what the controversial part of the ad is. However, I didn't see it when I initially clicked play. So I clicked play, and it's from Crockett Keller, who is doing a CCW class in Texas. He says what counties he's in, but I don't really remember. And as he's going over the ad, I'm listening to it in chunks. So, he introduces himself. He's saying he's offering a CCW class. Okay, I don't see what's so controversial about that. The cost of the class, like $100 or something like that. I don't see anything controversial with that. He accepts payment in cash, check, gold, silver, or used guns. Okay, maybe someone could get upset that he's accepting gold, silver, and used guns as currency, but he's taking it in trade. I don't understand what the big deal is. And then he drops the bomb, and then I understand what the controversy part is. And this is what is in the Shooting Illustrated post. And I didn't know whether to put this in the news section or in the featured content section, but I just didn't know where it fit, so I thought I would plug it in the featured content section. And the controversial part is, and this is a quote, "If you are a socialist liberal and or voted for the current campaigner-in-chief, please do not take this class. You have already proven that you cannot make a knowledgeable and prudent decision as required under law." And in addition to that little slice of heaven, he goes on to say, "If you are a non-Christian or Muslim, I will not teach you this class." I don't know how that didn't make it into the controversial little excerpt, but I was just kind of blown away. And he goes on to say, again, this is, and I say proudly, with no shame, this is Crockett Keller, and he goes on to say these from the Keller's Riverside store. So it was like, wow, it was one of those facepalm moments. Like, did he really just say that? So again, just a little featured shout out to Shooting Illustrated for pointing that out. I haven't heard anything more on the subject. I don't know what has come from this. Obviously, it's very controversial, and I can see why very many people got upset over it. But and the guy has the right to teach this class to whomever he wants. But I don't know. I can definitely see where this kind of rubs people the wrong way. But then again, if you are one of these people that are offended, you have every right not to take this class and not to give this guy your money. So, a little touchy ad, but check it out. It's definitely worth the listen just for the kind of facepalm moment. But that is from Shooting Illustrated. Well, this is the part of the show where I do the cigar and drink pairing of the episode. Now, over the last couple of weeks, I've been doing the Caribou Coffee Breakfast Blend coffee, and I mentioned why earlier on, in that my wife bought like the jumbo box of 80 of these things, thinking that it was a variety pack, and we have a ton of this coffee that we just constantly been drinking to get through it. But on top of that, I was feeling really achy, so I took 600 milligrams of ibuprofen, so I really didn't want to be putting alcohol on top of that, so I opted to go with coffee tonight. And it's the same coffee that I've done in the last 3 episodes, so I'm not going to harp on it. It's Caribou Coffee breakfast stuff. But the cigar is the Epicurio Quarline Maduro, and I bought a box of these from Mike over at Buckhead Cigar, who, again, as I say in every podcast, is my preferred retailer. I believe these are actually on sale if you were interested in getting some. And I'll tell you more about that right after. Actually, I should probably pull open the website so that I can give you the price and stuff. But these cigars come from EP Carrillo, obviously with the name of the cigar being EP Carrillo. But these are made by Ernesto Perez Carrillo, who got his fame or became most known for the work that he did for General Cigar under the La Gloria Cubana namesake. And the stuff that he did was wildly popular. I believe he's responsible for the La Gloria Cubana, just standard blend, the Serie R, some of the other special stuff that they did. And then after his contract ran out, he decided he was going to go off on his own and start his own cigar company, more or less for his children, so that when he was ready to get out of the industry, he had something to hand over to them, rather than just being under contract with General for the remainder of his career. So Ernesto starts this new cigar company, and he launched it with the inaugural 2009. I was really impressed with the cigar. I liked it, and I've been keeping an eye on him ever since. He's a very humble guy. I've talked to him on numerous occasions, and he's one of my favorite people in the cigar industry. He's very open to your opinion, and he's very forthcoming with information. If you have any question about his product, he will give you an honest answer. Some people in the cigar industry are a little touchy. They don't want to give you too much information about their stuff. Or if you present them with a problem, like, I was smoking your cigar and it was tunneling really bad, or this happened or that happened, they'll kind of sort of slide, change the subject and slide that issue away and start talking about something else. But Ernesto is very forthcoming with information, and he's just a fantastic guy. So I love, talking about his stuff, promoting his stuff, because it's always good. The Core Line Maduro uses a Maduro wrapper on, I believe it's just the Core Line blend. Actually, I think this is the EP Carrillo Maduro, but I think it's based on the Core Line blend. And being a Core Line, it is a more affordable cigar. This is the Encantos, which is a 50 by 4 7/8. Boxes run $115.95 or $33.95 for a 5-pack. Both of those prices are shipped from Buckhead Cigar. If you're interested in ordering them, you can pick up the phone and give Mike a call at 404-844-0400. You can see all the stuff that he has on sale at askthecigarguys.com. There's sort of a running list. And the EP Carrillo Maduro is at the bottom of that list, which I would imagine means it's going to fall off the on-sale items when the next cigar comes up, because that seems to be what happens. When Mike puts a new cigar up, the last item comes off, or he sells out, or however the case works. But the cigar is medium-bodied, medium to full-flavored. When I initially tried these cigars via samples from EP Carrillo, I really fell in love with them. They were really rich, really creamy, just beautiful cigars. When I bought this box, it wasn't as good as those samples. However, these are still very good. They're a little more on the bitter side. Bitter in kind of a good way, like some beer is kind of bitter, but it's kind of a good bitter. It has some chocolate tones. It's easy on the palate, easy through the sinus. It doesn't really beat up your palate. When you smoke the cigar, it doesn't feel like you're being overwhelmed. This is a cigar that I've smoked on more than one occasion in the morning. It's not overwhelming. Smoking it in the evening in this case, and it's stacking up really well to dinner and probably more Halloween candy than I should have had. But it's doing really well, and it pairs really well with coffee. It is one of many cigars that I really enjoy in the morning with a cup of coffee. There's just the Maduro wrapper and the coffee seem to work really well together. So there is your cigar and drink pairing for the episode, which should probably be cigar and coffee pairing at this point. But again, if you're interested in ordering, you can give Mike a call over at Buckhead Cigar at 404-844-0400. And that's going to do it for this little portion of the episode. So now we'll roll into the featured topic and close it out. All right, well, we're getting down to the end of the show, and it's about time to do the featured topic portion of the show. However, in the disorganized mess that this episode has been, I forgot to do that little kind of random topic update thing that I did in the beginning of the last podcast. So I wanted to push that off until now, and I only really had one item to talk about, and that was the Spyderco Delica 4. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about this, and then I want to talk about something else, which will be the topic of the episode. But I've been doing these little weekly updates on what I think of the Spyderco Delica 4. Again, this knife came courtesy of Cajun Blaze, and I've been really happy with it. And I keep saying that I've been really happy with it, but now I really love the knife at this point. When I was doing all the yard work, when the tree came down, I carried this knife in my pocket. Now, I stripped everything else out of my pockets, car keys, wallet, all that stuff, because, I knew I was going to be rolling around in snow and mud, and things were going to get beat and battered. So I left everything in the house, and the only thing I took outside with me was the knife, and I had it clipped onto my pocket. And yesterday, it kind of got beat up quite a bit with me climbing through tree branches and just kind of working around all this stuff. And on more than one occasion, I just kind of popped the knife out, and I was able to trim little tree branches. As I was cleaning up limbs, if my loppers to actually cut this stuff off were too far away and the branches were small enough, I just pulled out the knife, and I was able to clean off all of the branches so that it was easier to manage the bigger log or the bigger limb. And the knife did really, really well in those situations. And then today, I was doing a lot more cleanup than I was actual cutting. And when I was all finished and I pulled the knife out of my pocket when I got back in the house, it was just caked in all kinds of unpleasantness. Mud, tree sap, just sawdust from the chainsaw. It was just kind of caked and grimy, and it cleaned right off, and the knife looks just as good as it did when I got it. I mean, there's obviously I should wash it off a little bit more, but the knife looks great, and it still works great. I thought for sure that with all the stuff that I had on it, the action might get kind of sticky and gritty, but it hasn't. It still opens, just as smoothly as it did before, and it closes properly. It's just been fantastic. I'm really impressed with the way the knife stood up to just getting beat up and battered and just caked in, again, all kinds of unpleasantness. So at this point, I'm kind of in love with this knife. But I've got two other knives to carry daily and test out. I'll probably carry this for another week and then switch out to probably the Native 4 that Cajun Blaze also sent me. But at this point, I'm just really, really impressed with this knife and how it works and just everything about it. It's been awesome. So now that little random side topic is out of the way, I wanted to talk a little bit about gun shows. I mentioned that I wanted to do that last week. However, I got sidetracked with a match that I went to, a little fun shoot, and I talked about that instead. So in this episode, because I really don't have anything else in mind, I want to just kind of fire from the hip and talk a little bit about gun stuff, gun shows. And the first ones I want to talk about are the more serious shows, stuff that I see on the Outdoor Channel and on the Sportsman's Channel. I'm a really big fan of Shooting USA. I'm into competitive shooting. I like shooting USPSA. So when items like that are discussed, or Bianchi Cup or IDPA, I find Shooting USA really informative and really interesting to learn about what's going on in the sport outside of my local clubs. So the show has some great information. I love the way it's hosted, and it's very new gun owner friendly. If that's the kind of show you're looking for, it's not overwhelming with firearm information or firearm data. It's good for new shooters or experienced shooters, and it doesn't kind of give you information that goes over your head. Another gun show that I really like watching is Impossible Shots. Now, it's not really focused on what the guns are and how they operate. It's more about people doing amazing things with firearms and just doing some incredible shots. There's a guy that does Cowboy Quick Draw, who's in a recent episode that I watched did like 100-yard quick draw shot in in under a second, and it was just incredible. They always do some really interesting stuff. Jerry Michalak was shooting at long distance with the gun upside down, firing with his pinky finger. It's just really impressive stuff. Another firearm show that I like watching that I just started watching recently is I can't even remember what it's called. I think it's like Guns or something like that. It's the history of firearms, and I believe Michael Bain is involved with it. And there's a professional actor whose name is completely slipping my mind at this point, Joe Mantegna, and it gets really in depth with different firearms and their progression through history. And one of the most interesting shows that I watched was on Smith & Wesson revolvers and how they progressed and how they were used with the armed forces and things like that. It was really interesting stuff. So again, a show that I really enjoy watching. And then, there's also like personal defense TV that I like watching. The Best Defense is not based entirely on guns. However, there are firearms involved, and that's interesting as well. And then we get more to the dramatic stuff. Now, the show on the top of the list as far as drama is concerned comes from the Discovery Network, and it is Sons of Guns. Now, I've kind of been on the fence about this show. I mean, I watch it because it's interesting. However, I don't know how much of it I take seriously because it just seems really weird and scripted. Like, out of the blue, someone walks through the door and they want to use a Tommy gun for their I don't remember whether it was just the police department or a SWAT team or something like that. But the guy brings in a replica Tommy gun that he wants outfitted for his unit, and it was just kind of crazy. There are more modern weapons that will do the job better and will probably cost you less money than having these things retrofitted for your department. And then there are other things that are going on, like I think it was like a 20 millimeter anti-tank cannon or something like that, and it was a really big deal about they couldn't find ammunition, and then I read a blog post earlier or later on that said something along the lines of they must not have looked really hard because supplier X, Y, and Z all have plenty of stock, and they were making the show out to be a really big deal. They had to custom make the ammunition, and they couldn't find it. So it's just that kind of weird stuff. And then there's like safety issues that you see every once in a while where guy loads a blank and fires it in the shop just to scare people, which kind of turned me off a little bit. But I watch it because it's interesting, although all the kind of drama that's folded into the show gets kind of annoying, and some of the interaction with customers seems scripted. The newest one that I started watching was American Guns. I believe they're on episode 3 or 4. I think I've seen 3 of them, and it's a show that I really wanted to like when I first started seeing previews for it, because they present it in such a way that this guy is a gunsmith. He's one of the few people left that can craft a gun from a block of steel. So when I hear this stuff, I think, wow, this is really cool. We're going to see some really interesting stuff. And then I see the show, and it's so filled with drama. it's almost sickening. You've got the owner of the shop, and then there's some plight with the gunsmiths. They're not doing the job up to his standards, or they're not doing something properly, or the guy has a customer that comes in that wants a pink 1911, and he's throwing a fit because he doesn't want to do a pink 1911 because it's a man's shop. And the first thing that crosses my mind is just Duracoat the gun pink and stop complaining about it. Finally, he does it, and the customer's really happy, and everyone that's in the class with the customer is really happy, and it opens up a new market. And one of the things that I really dislike about this show is the guy, whenever he goes out to buy guns, he gets in his helicopter and flies to the location, to put out a really good impression. He's there, he means business, and it kind of intimidates the customers a little bit, and then he likes to throw money around. So if he's buying if he's going somewhere to buy a collection or something, he likes to throw a stack of money on the table and, kind of lowball these people. Guy says his collection's worth $75,000. That's what he's looking for. The guy says, I can sell it for $75,000. And then he drops $40,000 on the table. And, because the actual stack of $40,000 is there, the customer is supposed to jump all over it. And he's really surprised when the customer, obviously, who had the money to purchase $75,000 worth of guns, kind of just looks at the stack of money and says, I don't even see that there. You're not in the ballpark. You need to come up considerably. It's just kind of stuff like that. It just kind of irks me to see him almost kind of lowball these people. And I think he settled on $50,000 and a $3,000 knife, custom-made knife. And then as the part of the show is closing out, he says, "Oh yeah, I'll get $75,000 for these guns without a problem." And it's just kind of just the way he handles negotiations and things like that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Although again, he's a businessman, so he can do whatever he wants, whatever's best for the business. But off the top of my head, those are some of the shows that I watch. The stuff on the Discovery Channel is just kind of drama filled, and I watch them more for entertainment value, not so much for education. When I want to learn something, I turn to the Outdoor Channel or Sportsman's Channel, and I find that those two networks are the ones that produce good quality education. Or I guess it's a mixture of education and entertainment. When it comes to Discovery Network, it's all about drama and entertainment and less about educating the viewer. So I guess the Discovery shows are more for everyone, whereas on the Outdoor Channel and the Sportsman's Channel, that's more geared towards the gun enthusiast, not so much, the guy that kind of thinks guns are cool and just wants to watch stuff being blown up. So that is my sort of shoot from the hip, random, totally off-topic banter discussion topic. I want to apologize ahead of time for any mistakes or weird things that are going on in this episode. Generally, when I record these podcasts, I watch what I said, and then if I need to make a retraction or say something different, I'll make it up in the next piece. However, because I'm doing this at the very last minute, I haven't been able to watch all the stuff that I said, so I don't know if there was something that should have been omitted or re-recorded or anything like that. So what you're seeing is pretty much raw. I mean, I'll edit out the dead space at the beginning and the end, but everything else in between is what it is. So that's going to close out the episode. I want to thank you for watching episode 13 of Shooting the Breeze. If you're interested in getting a hold of me, you can do so on my blog. I make an effort to reply to all comments. Every now and again I miss one, but I really do my best and try to comment on everything, and thank you for taking the time to comment on my blog. You can also reach me on Twitter. That is at Walt W. I'm on Google+. You can look me up there, Walt White. Also on Facebook. And if you want to send me an email regarding anything you've seen on the show or you would like to see on the show, you can reach me at walt@waltinpa.com. So again, thank you for watching episode 13 of Shooting the Breeze, and I will catch you later.